Thanks for joining and welcome. My name is Michael Lappin, and I'm the founder of a company called BeginX, a UX career accelerator based on real mission-driven client projects that helps people who know UX basics transition into the field in one of the most efficient ways and without quitting their current jobs or other commitments. Okay, so what we're going to cover today is in this training is how to become hireable and land your first role faster without quitting a job and without spending a fortune. That's important too. Meaning, essentially, how you can make this entire UX career transition and become highly marketable for only a fraction of what you would typically spend if you chose to attend like a full-time school or boot camp or college, etc. So we'll go over the entire UX career transition journey step by step and also cover quite a few examples of how people did it successfully, right? So there's quite a bit of content to cover, and we want to make sure that it's super useful to you. We'll also have a section at the end of the presentation where we will briefly cover our own offering, our own career accelerator, because it can be a great opportunity for some of you. So before we jump into the details of the process of how to make this transition, let me just quickly show you some proof for credibility purposes. Okay, so far we have run multiple cohorts and helped quite a few people get hired by all these wonderful companies that you see on this slide. So we've seen and studied very many people who went through this entire transition. So let's quickly go over some specific alumni case studies who landed UX jobs successfully. Okay. So let's cover hot stories at a high level briefly, right? So before UX, Ahad was an architect, right? So he learned UX basics by reading books, articles, videos, and consuming anything he could about UX, in his own words. Then, while still working in architecture, Ahad did some personal UX projects in order to build up his portfolio, so to build up his hard and soft skills and gain experience. He also received training and mentorship from UX professionals, collaborated with the team, and helped startup design their whole onboarding experience. Okay, so Ahad became a more marketable candidate by improving his team collaboration and presentation skills and gaining real experience. After that, he started looking for UX roles and landed a job about a month later. Okay, so next up is Carrie. Prior to UX, Carrie actually worked in sales and operations, so a pretty different background. She then started learning about UX and consuming a lot of content online through videos, courses, and articles. Then she took a part-time UX basics course through GA, I believe, and plunged into practicing and building herself up, right? So she collaborated with a team on the real client projects for a startup while receiving training and guidance from industry practitioner mentors. She also worked with a career coach and networked extensively. Carrie then got hired as a UX researcher at JP Morgan. A few of her latest roles were senior UX researcher at Silicon Valley Bank, American Express, and a couple others. So she really mastered that process. Next up is Eduardo. So before UX, Eduardo worked as an industrial designer. He already had a solid understanding of design basics, but also did some additional UX learning through a couple of books and online as well. While still being employed at his old job, he collaborated with the team on 2 real client projects while receiving guidance and mentorship and training from UX practitioners. Afterwards, he got a product designer role at a startup called PercentApp, and later on got hired by bigger tech companies, including Teachers Pay Teachers and Olo. Okay, so let's briefly discuss Robbie's story. Before he worked as a teacher, actually, and when he decided to transition into UX, he started learning by taking a part-time online course, reading books, and participating in UX events. Later on, he also practiced and advanced his skills and experience by collaborating on 2 team client projects while receiving training and mentorship, all while still working at his day job, like the other folks as well. And after a few months of hard work, he got hired as a UX designer by Cutting Labs, which is a B2B software company. Okay, Mengi is another great example. So Mengi actually worked in marketing and also did some graphic design as part of her responsibilities. So she actually had a business degree from NYU. Then learned UX foundations online through platforms like Lynda and Interaction Design Foundation and similar ones. So she further built up her hard and soft skills by practicing on a real client project. While collaborating with mentors and a team, she persevered with her job search and got hired into a product design role at ViewLift. Currently, she's a senior product designer. It was all true, and I think currently it is actually Just Works. So her career took off. So also, let's cover quickly who this session is actually best for, right? To make sure we use everyone's time effectively here. First of all, you look to transition into UX role in one of the most efficient and affordable ways without quitting your current job or other commitments. You might already know UX basics, or you are willing to learn those independently, right? You may already know the essentials from experience, background, education, or other courses, or you're one of those folks who are like really motivated and can learn those basics independently online, okay? But even if you do not know those yet, this session will still be really valuable for you. You may be someone from a design, research, creative, tech, or related background. If you're not, do not worry, you'll still find this really valuable. The transition will just take you a little bit longer, right? If it's unrelated background, but it's still definitely doable, and this will be really useful for you. And finally, and one of the most important factors, actually, you're motivated and committed, right? So this is not easy. It's a lot of work. So you should be one of the folks who are not afraid of hard work, right? And who's basically not afraid to work hard to attain their goals. You may not be sure, right, what the best way is to make this whole career switch, right? There's a flood of information, but it's not clear how to best navigate this path, right? It may take a lot of time and trial and error to figure it out, right? You may not have an opportunity to quit a job or attend a full-time expensive bootcamp, right? You might already know design fundamentals and feel like attending a bootcamp would mostly just rehash the theoretical stuff you already know. You may not have any real work experience in UX, right? So, or you already tried searching for jobs, maybe. You might not be getting a lot of responses, and most employers say that they need someone with more experience. You may not be sure how to go about that whole search process, right? Your portfolio may still be a bit weak, and maybe you only have hypothetical student projects so far. Okay, so you may be concerned about wasting lots of time and money and not taking an effective path for making this career transition. You may also be concerned about getting stuck and not being able to make this career switch at all, right? Or you may be concerned that you'll basically not have an edge in a competitive job market among candidates with more experience than you have. Finally, you might also be afraid of just going broke by getting into tons of debt and then not being able to find a UX job altogether, right? So I want to basically put these fears to rest and tell you that if you are motivated and committed to put in a lot of work and a lot of effort, it is possible to make this career transition efficiently without losing months of income and having to spend tens of thousands of dollars as well. Okay. So I also want to briefly touch on who this is not for, right? So this is not for folks who are not committed, motivated, or willing to put in a lot of effort. This is not for those who do not consider themselves team players or self-starters, because that is key in this field. This is not for people who do not want to learn by doing. This is not for folks with constant negative attitude who cannot stop complaining. And so if you are one of those folks, it doesn't really make much sense for you to continue in the session. Okay. So let's go over the core concept here. So you can transition into UX efficiently without quitting your job, losing months of income, paying tens of thousands of dollars, and wasting months or even years. Okay. If you already know design basics, you do not have to waste money on learning what you already know. If you're motivated and committed, you can build yourself up to be the candidate employers want and market yourself effectively to get hired. Most career switchers or advancers don't properly understand how this ecosystem works and are unable to turn themselves into highly hireable candidates employers want without spending a fortune and or huge amount of time. Okay. All right, so before we get into the detailed steps, here's just a quick background on myself and our company for credibility reasons. Once again, I'm not saying this to brag or anything like that. Just want to give you guys some background. My name is Michael Lappin. I'm the founder of BeginX, a part-time UX career accelerator based on real mission-driven client projects that helps people transition into UX roles. So here's a bit more background on myself. So this is just a picture where we ran a workshop together with Jared Spool, one of the best known folks in the entire UX space. We do not have any formal partnerships or anything like that. This was just a joint workshop at a UX conference in New York. Okay, so far we've run multiple program cohorts, helped more than 100 people get hired. Our grads went to work for many companies like Coach, Google, SiriusXM, JP Morgan, Facebook, and many, many others, like you can see on this slide. Okay. We're also grateful to have recently been featured in SwitchUp's 2021 Best Design Programs ranking as #1. Here are some of the companies our advisors and mentors come from. Okay, here are some organizations. So we've collaborated with quite a few various organizations by now, including New York City Mayor's Office of, specifically their Office of Technology and Innovation, who we organized the UX Hackathon for, which was sponsored by Google, as well as, so we collaborated also with many other companies that you can see on the right on the slide. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a background and you understand that we know what we're talking about. Okay, so let's dive right in. First step, starting with the end in mind, understanding where exactly you need to be highly hireable by potential employers and how you will actually get there. Okay. So here's a typical way many people try to start or switch careers. Basically, they decide to start a new career, read about it, and jump into learning the skills, right? So the job sounds exciting and you want to get started ASAP. You think about switching a career as just typical learning and then job searching, okay? So instead of starting with understanding of what it takes to actually get hired in that specific role, and where you need to be that's a great candidate, you just find some program or a course or college and start the learning, right? So in some cases, you may also quit your job and lose your source of income, but you realize you may need to sacrifice that in order to make this career transition happen, which seems reasonable, right? At least at this point. So you kick things off, things are fun and exciting, right? So next you spend lots of time and money on learning. You learn the foundations, maybe the more advanced stuff, a lot of theory and concepts, and likely do some hypothetical projects. Okay, so then you start the job search by applying to lots of companies. Finally, you're done with learning. They're excited to actually start a new career. So you begin the job search by applying to lots of companies. Some people get lucky and find a job or internship, but the vast majority realize along the way that almost nobody wants to hire them. Things get much less exciting, and the process can get quite frustrating and demoralizing with lots of rejection and little hope. So after a few months, you basically try to figure out how to become more marketable so you can finally land that job. After wasting months or even years, a ton of money, possibly getting into lots of debt and almost going broke, some people might get completely demoralized and give up on this career altogether, while many others finally start trying to figure out what they're doing wrong and what do those picky employers actually want, okay? Then you realize that you do not really have the key qualifications most employers look for. Things are not fun because you realize that you already spent so much time and money and you still do not even have many of the qualifications companies look for and do not meet the experience requirements and are stuck trying to get there, okay? So then you build yourself up and finally land a job. So again, some people might just give up here, right? It's a tough journey, especially if you do it in the kind of the old way. Many others finally, at some point after lots of time has passed, finally do land a job. Okay. And here's the old result, right? So if you make it through all these frustrating phases and not give up or have to quit this pursuit for financial reasons, you should land the job at some point, right? However, months, if not years, have been wasted along with a ton of money, potentially lots of debt accumulated. You could even have been afraid of going broke along the way, experienced lots of chronic stress that could have impacted your health. So basically not the best way to start to switch career, right? But unfortunately, many people face that. Here's a new way, right? So basically you need to start with the end in mind, understand where exactly you need to get to be highly hireable by potential employers and how exactly you will get there. So essentially you want to UX this whole career transition journey and think from the standpoint of an employer. So you want to become a candidate who employers look at and think, this is definitely someone who can solve their specific problems and hit the ground running and bring value to our company. And they need validation, proof that you can actually do that, which they look for when recruiting and evaluating your application. Here's a quick overview of the key competencies that you actually need to gain. We'll explore all these areas in more detail on the following slides. Okay, so as you can see, there are hard skills, softer skills, real experience, 3+ case studies. That's the left side here. And on the right side, you have portfolio that shows the case study, skills and experience, resume and online presence that tell your story, UX interview and storytelling mastery, and finally, master effective UX job search strategies. Okay, so how do we come up with these? Well, definitely not out of thin air. Here's what we did. So we interviewed and analyzed hundreds of candidates, identified who had the most success in getting hired faster and why. Interviewed 30 employers, hiring managers, or probably by now even more than that, to understand what they're looking for. Analyzed job postings to identify typical employer requirements, and ran over 50 events with both candidates and employers, interviewed them, and gained insights on what works best. So essentially, we used the UX process and did a ton of research to identify the key roadblocks people experience in this transition journey and gain insights on what is needed in order to design a better way to solve these problems and make this transition effectively. Then we synthesized all this research and identified common themes. Again, one of the key takeaways is to start with the end in mind, right? It seems simple, but it's so key, and so few people do it. And you need to clearly understand what you need to achieve to be really attractive to employers so you can actually get hired and not just learn a lot of stuff and then get stuck. Okay, so understand exactly how you can become that highly hireable candidate, right? So you know where you need to be. Now let's explore a simple framework for how you can actually get there. Here's a high-level overview. We'll dive into each of these phases in a bit. First, you learn the essentials, foundations of UX, the key principles and concepts, the UX process, main methods, deliverables, tools, okay? So we call this next major phase practice and grow. So this is probably the longest and practical phase where most of your real learning, skill, and experience building will actually take place. This phase is mostly about applying, practicing, learning things in more depth in the process, advancing your skills, and building that real experience. The next phase is about creating all the search assets. So this essentially involves packaging and presenting all the skills and experience in an effective portfolio, resume, and online presence. So key phase necessary to position yourself as an attractive candidate for your job search. And the final phase is search prep and execution, which involves learning and mastering effective search strategies, the UX interviewing process prior to kicking off your search. Okay, so we found that a lot of people really like this analogy, right? So the product analogy, right? So the first two phases are actually quite similar to building a product, right? And we call them learn and build stage. The last two phases are very similar to actually marketing and selling of that product. So that is how we refer to this stage. Okay, so essentially the first big mistake people make is they do not build a great product that is attractive to employers, which means you do not develop your skills sufficiently, or you do not have any experience. And if the product is not great, it will be very hard, if not impossible, to market and sell it, even if you're a master marketer. So the other big mistake people make is after building an amazing product, they do not devote much effort to really understand what marketing and sales is about, right? So they're thinking just having the skills and experience is enough, and then it is just a matter of applying to tons of jobs, meaning they do not really understand any of the science behind the marketing and sales, which means they do not put enough effort in order to position themselves as an attractive candidate, and do not learn what effective search strategies are and how to navigate this hiring process successfully. And if you do not do that, you can also get stuck looking for jobs for a very, very, very long time, if you get there at all. So that is crucial. Okay, so on this slide, you can see how the key competencies you need to gain map nicely into this transition journey, right? So you see when you can attain which competencies specifically. This is essentially a high-level view of what is needed to have, of what you need to have to be that highly hireable candidate, and when you can attain that. So here's a quick summary of the first high-level step. Start with the end in mind. Understand where exactly you need to get to be highly hireable by potential employers and how you will actually get there. Ensure you have a solid product before selling. Otherwise, you can waste months or even years. Once you have that solid product, it is key to learn, practice, and apply the principles and best practices behind the marketing and selling in order to get hired faster. Do not confuse what phase you're in, right? So understand where you are and what may be blocking you from making progress, and focus on what is most important at the moment. And do not spread yourself too thin, doing too much at one time, as that will yield very little progress. Okay, so learning the essentials is the next phase, is the next step. Let's cover some common mistakes related to this particular phase of your transition. So first one is thinking that learning is the only main thing you need to do, and then you will just get a job. Okay, learning is just one of the important pillars for building a solid product that will make you marketable to employers. Okay. Another mistake is performing more theoretical just in case learning, right? So a whole bunch of stuff, most of which will not be used. This can also take an indefinite amount of time and steal months or even years from you without bringing you the result that you actually want. Next one is assuming that just learning the UX foundations will get you a job. Even if you're coming from a design or research background, it is not enough to get hired in the vast majority of cases. Next one is overpaying for courses that just teach you UX basics, right? So some folks may need to take in-person courses for learning the basics, or live courses, right? So that is totally fine. Just do your research and do not overspend, because there are very many options with huge variations in price. If you can learn the theory and essentials online on your own, there are also very many free or cheap resources that you can save a ton of money on. Okay. If you do not avoid these mistakes, the result can basically be spending a ton of time or money and just to learn the basics and not making much progress to actually starting your UX career. And basically that doesn't have to be the case. Okay, so talking about learning essentials. Quite a few of you may already know basics, right? So, and this step is also one of the more obvious steps, right? So you will not spend lots of time here. But I do want to quickly cover a few things you may find useful. This is mostly about the basic hard skills, right? So knowledge of the UX process, methodologies, key deliverables, and tools. During this phase, you can also do some exercises and small projects to help you learn. Know the difference between upskilling / learning versus career transition courses, right? So upskilling or simple learning courses are just that, to obtain those skills, and those are typically not designed to help you switch your career into UX. That is what career transition programs and boot camps are usually for, right? So however, upskilling courses can usually teach you the UX basics and foundations, right? So that you need to learn first, right? So those can be helpful initially. Understand different options available. So one option is independent study courses, so self-study, online courses, books, articles. So some examples of self-study. So this is the cheapest option. Some examples are Coursera, Lynda / LinkedIn Learning, so it used to be called Lynda, Interaction Design Foundation, Udemy, Skillshare, Treehouse. So you could also learn from books and articles. So these courses are usually quite cheap or even free, but you do not usually get much of any support or accountability and have to kind of learn on your own. Right. So the next one is mentor / instructor-led online or in-person courses. Right. So this type of courses provides support and guidance as well as some accountability. And they're also much more expensive than the self-study ones. You can typically find these at colleges or continuing education UX courses, like, for example, in NYC, that would be like FIT or Pratt or NYU. Or through training organizations or boot camps such as GA or similar ones. Okay. Another option is higher education. So obviously there is also higher education, right, which is usually the most expensive option, but it can be well worth it if you do not yet have a degree, right? So if you already have a degree, then it can be like TBD whether it's going to be useful for you. Okay. So here are some key points from this first step. This is just the start. It will not get you a job in vast majority of cases. Most of your learning and growth will happen when you start the next phase, practicing, applying in order to grow. That phase will also take much longer than learning the essentials. Learn by doing as much as you can, and try to get your first case study done while learning the basics, right? So kind of achieve two goals at the same time. If you already know UX basics or are coming from another type of design background, you can save a lot of money. This is the easiest phase to do it independently online, and you can basically save a ton of money that way. If you're really motivated and can learn theory and concepts well independently, as said before, you can save a lot of money on this phase, especially if you're coming from another type of design background. So how can I learn UX basics online without breaking the bank, right? So it's possible to save a lot of money. Kind of talked about this a little bit, right? So while learning the foundations, right? You can use platforms like we mentioned, like Coursera or edX or Skillshare for free or cheap access to lots of university courses. You can also use LinkedIn Learning, Interaction Design Foundation, and Udemy, and also through books and articles. How long can learning the basics take? So this really depends on you and the amount of time and effort that you have, the amount of time you have available, and your motivation and commitment, right? If you fully immerse yourself and do like 15-hour days, you can probably do this in like a couple of weeks, right? But if you can learn part-time, it is usually possible to do it from anywhere from like 1 to 3 months or so, okay, depending on your background as well. How can I save money with the UX career transition if I come from a design-related background? If you come from a design-related background or related backgrounds like graphic design, architecture, fashion design, research, etc., it will be easier for you to make this transition than for someone coming from unrelated fields, right? Because you may already know a lot of the design foundations and processes, have related experience and transferable skills, which means you do not need as much learning education as someone coming from a totally unrelated field. So you can save money that way, right? Because you mainly just need to build a UX portfolio and learn how to position and market yourself to employers, right? So this type of background can really help you get started, basically, and you can transition for like a fraction of the cost. So we'll also talk about this in the next section as well. Poonam is asking, any certifications that you recommend? So honestly, I mean, I have like a strong opinion about this, but I would say, yeah, those can definitely be useful, right? Maybe like, for example, like Google relatively recently released their certification on Coursera, right? So you can go through that specialization, for example. But on the other hand, I would not get too hung up on certifications and brand names unless it's like a top university or something like that, right? With like really prestigious brand name, right? I would mostly focus on your skills because that is important. But what employers usually look at, as we'll cover in a few slides, they look at experience, they look at your skills, they look at your portfolio, right? So certifications can help, but it's not, I would not prioritize that as like the highest and most important. All right, awesome. So let's move forward with to the next phase. Next phase is basically, we call it practice and grow, right? This is where you become a candidate that employers actually want to hire before marketing yourself. Okay, so here's the old way and some common mistakes related to this phase. So this phase includes skill building, hard skills, case studies, right? So we'll cover quite a bit in this area, and then we'll get to portfolios after that. So one mistake is not building a great product, right, before starting to market it to the employers, right? So essentially not focusing the learning and building on what is actually needed to be that attractive and marketable candidate. Okay. Another mistake is paying lots of money for courses where you already know the majority of the content, because you can't, you can't take just a piece of what you need, basically, especially if you're coming like from a design or research background already. Another one is not focusing on mastering the crucial software skills. Often these can be even more important than hard skills during a search. That is why team collaboration, presentation, client management are listed on majority of job descriptions. Another one is not gaining any real experience before starting to market yourself. So experience is listed again on pretty much any job description. Another one is spending most of the learning time on theory and hypothetical projects, small student projects, and solo work, right? So some theory, of course, is important, but UX is quite hands-on, and most of the actual learning will happen when you start practicing what you learned. Okay, hypothetical projects are fine in the beginning, totally fine, but their value in a portfolio is quite small compared to real ones. Okay, so you do need to be able to perform the work on your own, right? However, ability to collaborate in a team is vital to your success in this field, right? And that is why it's listed again on almost any job description. You want to look at as professional, right, as you can when you're looking for work, right? So some people may get away with just hypothetical projects in their portfolio, but you will likely have a hard time competing with others. Another mistake is working on any client project that you can get instead of ones that actually give you valuable case studies and make you marketable. Okay, so that's a common mistake, is just spending a ton of time and just doing a lot of freelance work without really discerning whether this will really get you closer to your ultimate goal of landing that UX job. And the old result, right, is basically, again, spending lots of time and money and then still not being very marketable without any experience, right, which can result in months or even years of frustration because nobody wants to hire you, right? So it can be pretty frustrating. Okay, so the new way is basically becoming a candidate employers want to hire before marketing yourself. Okay, so here are a few key points related to this particular phase, right? So build, advance, and deepen your skills here, right? So learning by doing / context-based learning is most effective typically. UX is, again, as mentioned, very hands-on. This is a hands-on phase where most of your learning will happen. It will also take much longer than just learning the basics and theory. Okay. So let's take a look at some real life examples here first. So Ahad, who we talked about briefly earlier, in order to practice and grow after first learning the basics, Ahad then worked on a few personal projects to build up his hard skills along with his portfolio. Then he worked with a team and helped a medtech startup design their onboarding process. Their team covered all the phases of the UX process, from initial conceptualization and research all the way to iterating on their higher fidelity prototype, right? So this allowed Ahad to not just build up the hard skills, but also develop the key softer skills like team collaboration, presentation, along with gaining that real experience, which he could put on his resume and portfolio, and then talk extensively about in interviews. Okay. Rachel learned the basics and some hard UX skills through a part-time mentored online course, where she also worked on her first case study, which was hypothetical, which is definitely okay for the first one. Then she collaborated with the UX team while getting mentorship and hands-on training from industry practitioners, and completed an end-to-end UX process client project with a company that repurposes flowers and would otherwise be thrown away. by providing those organizations and people in basically providing those flowers to organizations and people in need, like orphanages or hospitals. And she helped design software that would help this organization work much more efficiently. She had regular client interaction and presentations. Then later on, she worked on another real startup client team project with an actual team. She has done all this while still working at her old job. This allowed Rachel to build up her technical skills, softer skills like client management, and gain real experience, and get several comprehensive and large case studies, which made her quite marketable and gave her a competitive advantage among other candidates transitioning into the field. Let's also talk about Carrie briefly. After Carrie picked up basics from that part-time course that we mentioned, she actually tried searching for UX jobs, but without much luck, right? Because she had no real experience and it was hard to demonstrate to employers those key softer skills, right? So Carrie also worked on it. After that, Carrie also worked on a team for a small startup in the event space, covering all the key phases, UX phases, while receiving expert training and guidance from UX industry mentors. This also allowed her to gain the key competencies that are listed again on almost any UX or product design job description, like real experience, teamwork, meeting facilitation, client management, which made her an attractive candidate. Okay, so building up your hard skills. Understand the UX process and phases well, and be able to produce the deliverables for each of those phases, right? Again, hard skills this seems to be like the easiest point for everyone. It's like this is the most obvious, what most courses focus on, right? Just ability to do UX work. One of the first parts of this phase is basically just understanding the UX process, the umbrella, and being able to produce deliverables in each of the phases of this process, right? After you know the basics, it is good to start putting those skills into practice with small design projects or bigger design projects. This phase is pretty straightforward, and interestingly, again, this is what many people think is like the only thing needed to learn to get a UX role, but it is only one of the areas to make yourself an attractive candidate. Okay, so next, building up your hard skills, right? So you need to get proficient with the tools. So the tool logos that you see below are typically some of the most commonly used in the industry. So that's Sketch, XD, and Figma. Figma has been growing a ton, right? And really grew over like last 3 to 4 years. Project-based learning typically works best. You can also do various design challenges or attend hackathons or practice and build your skills. Keep in mind, though, that these smaller projects will not be as valuable for your portfolio, right? So the main goal for those is just to practice and build up your skills. Remember that hard skills is just the start, right? So a lot more traditional schools basically focus just on this, right? The technical skills. This is a mistake because in order to get a candidate hired, there are several other important areas that need to be built up. Software skills are absolutely crucial. As you can see, software skills can be found in abundance on job descriptions. Often these make up over half of the overall requirements on a basically description of a role, of a UX role. This is also one of the reasons employers often ask you behavioral questions during interviews and give you various test exercises and assignments. So as mentioned earlier, these software skills are critical. So not building software skills that are crucial in your job and during interviews is a huge mistake. These are extremely important, often even more important than hard skills. Based on lots of employers' interviews that we conducted and job posts analyzed, here are some of the most common soft skills that employers look for. So empathy and curiosity, definitely very important key in UX. Team collaboration, this is huge. If you cannot collaborate with a team effectively, it will be extremely hard for you to succeed in a UX role. Client and stakeholder management, interaction, understanding business and justifying business decisions. Next one is presentation. Basically, ability to present your work to clients or colleagues in an effective way. You will do this a lot in UX. Next one is facilitation. You'll likely be running lots of workshops and meetings, so being able to facilitate those effectively is crucial. Communication, influence, and persuasion. This is huge, as you will need to be able to clearly explain your research findings and reasoning behind your design decisions and be able to get your clients, managers, or stakeholders on board. Okay. These are a must to practice and develop if you actually want to land the UX job. So how do you actually build up these software skills? So these skills are mostly built through hands-on practice and experience, right? So you do need to, so it's a good idea to learn some theory first through online courses, books, and articles. Maybe that's like roughly 10 to 20% of your total efforts and the effort in the software skill area. And then get just tons of hands-on practice, right? That would be like 80 to 90% of the efforts in software skill building. Okay, so next up is real experience, right? So you want to show that you have that real experience, right? So again, this is listed on almost any job description. Companies want proof that you have actually done it in real life and can hit the ground running, right? That's why experience is so important. If you have done it well for someone else, in their eyes, it drastically increases the chances of you being able to do great work for them, right? So that's kind of the reasoning behind it. Here are some mistakes related to real experience, right? So one mistake is just not building any real experience and trying to market yourself to employers. However, this is not your fault, right? As this is the typical traditional way of starting a career, right? So I've spoken with quite a few folks being stuck for this reason. They just keep applying and sending their resume for months, if not years. Essentially, it is similar to just keeping kind of banging your head against the wall and using a tactic that doesn't work while expecting a different result to occur for some reason, right? So it's important to not do that. Another one is overdoing hypothetical projects and thinking that it will get you hired, while doing some student passion and solo hypothetical projects can definitely be useful. Doing only such small projects and doing too many of them is not likely to get you very far, right? So these can be good for preparing for interview design challenges, which we'll cover in a bit, or just practicing your skills. Those typically won't be that useful for your portfolio or experience building. You want to look as professional as you can when you're looking for work, right? So some people may get away with just hypothetical projects in their portfolio, but you will have a very hard time competing and can get stuck for a very long time. How can you actually gain that real experience, right? So the good news is that having a full-time job in the field is not the only way to gain that experience, right? And you can solve the no job without experience and no experience without a job catch-22 problem. Right, so one option is volunteering, right? Just finding organizations to volunteer for. Another is pro bono consulting. It may just be hard if you're just starting out because you're very new and the organization you help may not know much about UX either, but it's still doable. Just requires initiative, motivation, and strong communication and persuasion skills. Another one is internships. This can be tricky because the good ones, where you will actually do interesting work or like and get mentorship and grow, it's hard to find as actual UX jobs, right? So and often these are mainly reserved for students, but it's possible, right? So just beware of tons of internships where you just do like menial, very narrow tasks, and that will basically will not really grow and get valuable case studies from that, right? So we'll cover that in more detail in a bit as well. Another one is freelancing, and also entrepreneurship could be a good one as well. Maybe you ran a company, you did a project, right? So you could turn that potentially into a case study. Okay, so here are some tips about gaining real experience. Here are a few key things that you want to ensure that this could actually work well for you. You do not have to quit your current job to build experience, right? So doing it part-time is totally fine, and it will still look fine on your resume. It can even look better because it may potentially be longer. It is important that you can provide value to the organization, right? So because otherwise, even if they do not have to pay you, it may not be worth it for them because it may be a huge investment of time from their side. So you cannot just come in and expect them to spend a ton of time and teach you if your skills are totally lacking and you can't provide much value yet. So before trying this, learning essentials and picking up some skills is important. Also, this might apply to only some people. Basically, do not be jealous that they're getting value, right? And you're doing the work pro bono. You're benefiting from this work and relationship much more than you would from doing a hypothetical project, right? So appreciate the opportunity and aim to provide a ton of value, right? Within reasonable limits, of course. If you do well, you're likely to build greater relationships, get strong referrals for the future, or they might even hire you themselves. Ensure, on the other hand, that the work is also highly beneficial for you, right? So on the other hand, it is key for you to understand this engagement effectively and ensure the work you do is highly beneficial for yourself, right? So you're working on an interesting, challenging, and sizable project. So it's not just like 2 days long and on something like that. It needs to cover many phases and areas of the UX process. This is a must because if the work does not provide you with great experience and a case study, you're much better off finding another project that does provide that, right? So this is something a lot of people miss in the beginning. They're just like excited, oh, we volunteer and help this company, but you have to ensure that it's actually a useful, solid, strong case study and experience. This is actually an advantage of volunteering and pro bono over paid work, right? So you have much more leverage in shaping your project, and company cannot just boss you around and limit what you do as much as they could if they hired you and were paying you a lot of money, right? So you provide value and work pro bono, so you have more say in shaping the project, right? Like covering different phases of the UX process, setting your own hours. This is very important, and you have to make sure the project is sizable, covers various phases of the UX process. Always think how the work will ultimately look on your portfolio and what employers may think about it. Confirm in advance and in writing that you can showcase your work in your portfolio, right? Again, very important point. This is important to do so you do not actually waste your time and actually get the benefits you're looking for in the first place. Okay. So let's briefly talk about case studies. So we're not talking about portfolio yet, but just like case studies themselves. Here are some common mistakes, right? So one mistake is thinking that taking one course with a hypothetical UX case study will get you hired because you have other design experience or supposedly you already have the skills. Usually this doesn't happen. There are exceptions, of course, and some folks may get lucky, but that is typically an exception and not the rule, right? So the exception is usually in that case studies like one real and large project. Another one is thinking them in a way like the more the better and showcasing too many small case studies, doing a lot of UI only projects that do not really cover any other UX phases. UX is not just about visual or UI design, right? So while doing a ton of tiny project may help you improve your skills and maybe prep better for interviews if you do it right, it will not be very useful for the actual case studies in your portfolio. So here are some case study guidelines. Have at least 3 case studies. So a lot of people ask how many case studies should I have to be able to get hired? Again, we've done a ton of research in this area and interviewed hundreds of people who went through this journey. Usually the consensus is that you need at least 3. We are not yet talking about marketing yourself and how to structure and showcase those in your actual portfolio, right? We're still in the learning and building phase, right? That's what we're discussing. And so this is about understanding how much and what type of work you need to actually do to become quite marketable. Ensure your case studies are sizable, right? So each one is at least a month or 2 long in duration. This is a bit subjective, of course, depending on how much work and you're putting in daily or weekly. So this is just ballpark. Essentially, you need to ensure with the projects that the projects are sizable and not just something that you did in a day-long hackathon. Larger projects will also look much better on resume or LinkedIn when recruiters or hiring managers are evaluating you later. Ensure every case study covers at least a few phases of the process, right? So again, I'm not talking about small design exercise that you'll need to practice for the interviews, right? Or to practice skills, but the actual projects that you will have as case studies in your portfolio. Okay, so coming back to real experience, try to have at least 2 projects with real clients. While we could simply try to cheer you up and say, yes, complete a basics UX course with a hypothetical project and you're good to go, we prefer being more honest and transparent here. You already know how most companies and open roles require candidates with experience, so same thing applies here, to avoid wasting a ton of time trying to market yourself while your product is not that great yet. Getting this real experience one way or another could really help you, right? So this can really speed up your job search. The more real client work you can show, the more professional experienced you will look, and you want to be able to stand out among your competition. Okay, so collaborate with a team. This is really important because tech is definitely a team sport, and working with a team is quite different and much more challenging than working by yourself. You want to demonstrate that software skill which is critical to employers, and prove that you can actually do that effectively. And document everything thoroughly while you're working. This is absolutely crucial. If you don't document what and how you're doing as you go, creating your portfolio and writing case studies will be much more painful and take several times longer, because it will be hard to remember what you did and when and why and how. So save yourself some time and avoid the headache, and document as you work on the project. Okay, so to summarize this area, right? So big practicing and growing phase. Basically, you need to gain solid hard skills, have strong software skills, build up real experience, and have 3 or more sizable comprehensive UX case studies. So here are some common questions that we often get. How to find companies to volunteer for. So you can obviously talk to friends, talk to startup organizations, and accelerators can be a good source. Just contact companies and offer to basically do some work for them, right? So this can really help. How do I advance my software skills? It is mostly done through hands-on practice, right? So this will go hand in hand with your practice and experience building. Do internships really work for gaining real experience? Yes, if you can get a good one. But you may run into similar challenges as with obtaining your first job. Lots of requirements and competition, right? So another problem with internships, and even with some jobs, frankly, that you may not really learn much, or basically do decent sizable work that will look great in your portfolio, right? So if you're at a top design school or program, you may have much better chance of getting a great internship. Often, for many others, it is a good idea to build yourself up a bit more and become more hireable and marketable even prior to trying to land a good internship. Okay, can freelancing work for building experience? Yes, it can be a good option. You just might run into similar challenges as with internships, right? So often you might get some UI work, but because a lot of UX is in-house often, or reserved for more experienced pros, not those who are just starting out, right? So it can be like a hit or miss, but it can definitely help as well. Cool. So let's take a look at some questions that we have here. So Courtney is asking, what should a portfolio include? So that's actually our next phase, Courtney. So we'll explore that in detail. Poonam is asking, how to get personal projects and execute them without a mentor. Well, personal project can be like anything, right? And honestly, we would recommend that you do not overdo those, right? Only do it for practicing just practicing your skills, not for your portfolio, not to get a case study, as I mentioned earlier. Or practice for like design interviews, right? Or the design challenge type of interview, right? And you can execute them without a mentor easily. Like it will just can take a little bit longer, right? It's because you may not always have someone to like answer all the questions. So you may have to do a lot more Googling, right? You can also refer to some of the courses or programs that we mentioned earlier. Where there are some courses that give you like asynchronous support, meaning you can still ask some questions or maybe ask questions from peers. You can also join Slack groups, right? But obviously, yeah, having a mentor can definitely help and make you progress faster, especially later in the process, right? So initially, when you learn the basics, it's not that hard, right? But as you're applying, applying your skills, especially in the real setting, then that support can really like accelerate your progress. Okay, awesome. So let's move on then. Step 4 is creating irresistible job search assets that show employers that you're an amazing candidate. So some common mistakes related to this, right? So it's basically not understanding that asset creation and job search are essentially marketing and sales, and not learning the science behind that. Creating a basic portfolio and resume instead of optimized and effective job search assets that will get employers' attention. Spending too little time on this phase and not learning and applying the best practices for creating the search assets. Not dedicating much time to resume, since portfolio is most important, right? So resume is important as well. Not getting user and industry practitioner feedback and not iterating on that and trying to figure everything out on your own, right? And basically the old result is assets that do not work well and do not get much employer attention, causing you to waste months of your time and lose many potential job opportunities in the process. Okay, so a better way is to create those irresistible search assets, right? And so you can showcase to employers that you're that amazing candidates that they really want to hire. Okay. So again, how did we come up with these guidelines? So here's where these guidelines are coming from, right? So we interviewed more than 30 employers, surveyed 50 plus accelerator program alumni, ran events with senior UX professionals to explore this topic with folks from Google, The Economist, JP Morgan, IDEA, and LearnVest, and many others. And also interviewed and analyzed hundreds of candidates who had the most success and basically got hired the fastest. Okay. So reviewing specific portfolios in depth is not in scope of this session, right? Because otherwise, because we're reviewing the whole journey. Otherwise, this would take like 5 hours. Probably. However, if you'd like to see a couple of great examples, feel free to check out these folks' online portfolios. They have done a really good job with those. Ahad is currently at Facebook, and Eduardo is at a high-growth tech startup called Olo. By the way, we also have a portfolio workshop video posted on our website, right? So where the instructor goes over a few great portfolio examples in much more detail. So you can also check that out later as well, okay? So creating a portfolio that shows the case studies, skills, and experience. Okay, so treat your portfolio as a UX project, right? So keep in mind your users, who are hiring managers, the recruiters, along with their key goals, needs, and pain points, right? So get feedback from others as well. Test it out and iterate. Research others' portfolios before creating yours to better understand best practices and synthesize. Do not waste time on reinventing the wheel, right? Just synthesize, improve, and customize, right? There are lots of great examples available, including the ones we just shared with you. Show your process. Ensure it is a UX portfolio, not just a UI portfolio, meaning do not just show wireframes and polished prototypes, right? You should cover multiple phases you went through and show what you have done and why at each phase, right? And what you learned and how you move forward. Right, so write it all out. What UX methodologies did you use and why? What did you learn from the research, right? Then how you synthesized everything, and how did that drive your future design decisions, right? Hiring managers need to understand why you did what you did. Okay, so here's your chance to basically lay it all out for them. Showing the process helps you showcase your thinking and how and why you make those decisions. It is key for employers to see because it helps them evaluate you as an applicant, right? So demonstrate your software skills and real experience as well. Ensure your portfolio has great information architecture and is easy to scan and understand quickly. As often, a recruiter or hire manager making the first pass through a set of portfolios may not have more than like 5-10 minutes to look it over, or maybe seconds, in some cases, right, when they're trying to like really skim through them. and then basically take a first pass. If yours is hard to scan, they may just pass on your application altogether. Okay. Create a portfolio that shows the case studies, skills and experience, right? So another tip is show your contribution and give credit to your teammates, right? Basically, if it was a team project, right? So if you worked on a team project, that is awesome. It's great that you worked in a group and together came up with an incredible solution for the users. But what did you do specifically? What were your specific contributions? Did you make any mistakes? What did you learn from that, right? And how did you move on? Point that out. Make sure you also give credit to your team. If employers see this as a team project, but you say nothing about them, about the team, and take all the credit, you'll definitely not look great, right? And it may be a turnoff for your hiring manager. Show the messy, not just polished designs, right? So hopefully your project doesn't just highlight high fidelity wireframes and prototypes. Showing off your work at all stages of the process gives you opportunities to articulate your design decisions, weave in feedback from stakeholder presentations and user testing. This adds to the story that you're telling the reader of where you started and how you got to the finish line, okay? Clearly highlight your best projects. Once you complete more UX work, make sure you showcase the ones that you are most proud of and the ones that best represent you as a designer first, okay? So the rule of thumb is lead with your strongest project first. Ideally, the more comprehensive one where you explain your research, design direction, failures, and mistakes, and dive deep into the explanation of your thinking and whys. And I need some more tea. And all the whys for each step. Okay. So next up is resume, right? So create a resume and online presence that demonstrates those skills and experience, right? So portfolio is key, but resume is very important as well. Even though resume may not be as important for designers as portfolio, it is still key because sometimes employers or recruiters can use resume as the initial filter. So not creating an effective resume is a big mistake. Ensure the resume matches your portfolio and includes the same case studies, right? So you don't want them to look at your resume and your portfolio and see two different people, or like not being able to find what you show on your portfolio, on your resume. You want your user experience, who is a recruiter or hiring manager, to be great, obviously, right? So ideally, you should have as many real client case studies as possible so you can put those in the professional experience section, which will be a huge competitive advantage for you and help you land way more interviews, okay? Highlight your transferable skills. Usually you have many more useful and transferable skills than you think, right? So various things you have done before may simply be called differently. So for example, if you have done requirements gathering as a business analyst, that can be closely related to user research. If you have done user acceptance testing, that may be almost the same as usability testing in UX. If you have mapped business process flowcharts, that can be very similar to task or user flows and so on. Also remember about the soft skills. Maybe you did some facilitation before, right? Maybe you collaborated with a team. Maybe you did presentations. Think and clearly point out all of the skills that could be used in UX, okay? So this will be really, really important. This is your responsibility, basically, to tell a great story here, right? No one else will do it for you. Use industry terms and keywords. Sometimes recruiters would just use keywords from job descriptions and search for candidates that way in resume databases or LinkedIn. So you want to come up in those searches, right? Also, recruiters or hiring managers may be scanning your resume very quickly, looking for those keywords. So similar to the previous point, study UX job descriptions and make a clear parallel of what similar type of activities you have done. Pepper in those keywords so you're positioned as a much better match for UX roles than someone else. Showcase the key soft skills, right? So remember how we talked about the soft skills, right? So again, ensure you point all of those clearly on your resume and LinkedIn, right? So study your user needs well using job descriptions and present yourself in the best possible light. Show real client work experience in the experience section specifically, right? Not just projects or education. If you have done real work with real companies, make sure it's listed in professional experience area, right? And not as some other extracurricular activity or something like that. Whatever the terms, be it contract or full-time or part-time or volunteering, whatever are the terms, right? Work is work. And the key part is that you have done real work and it is a part of your actual real experience. Okay, so highlight that clearly so you are, again, presented in the best possible light and can compete well in the job market. Okay, ensure your LinkedIn profile shows you in the best possible light. Show yourself as a UX professional and make sure your LinkedIn is benefiting you and not the other way around. So make your LinkedIn profile in line with your UX-focused resume. Again, you don't want your users to be totally confused or disappointed when looking at your various assets and profiles. Okay, if you cannot update your LinkedIn, make sure it doesn't hurt your search, at least, right? So in some cases, you may not be able to update LinkedIn due to concerns like from your current employer. So you're really, if you're really concerned about that and cannot just change settings as needed, then maybe make sure your LinkedIn is not a turnoff for potential employers, right? Meaning they look at your portfolio and it's amazing, and then they find you on LinkedIn and there's pretty much nothing there about UX. Okay, in that case, maybe just set it to private or something, like, so it does not harm your search and recruiters do not perceive you as someone not looking like UX professional at all, right? So there is a whole book devoted to creating and using LinkedIn profile called How to Write a Killer LinkedIn Profile by Brenda Bernstein. Ensure that any other social media profiles make you look better and do not hurt you. Okay, so it seems somewhat common sense, but so many people get burned by this, right? So you want those to make you look great to employers and do not affect your professional image in any way. Okay. So to summarize this section, right, you need to create a portfolio that shows the case studies, skills, and experience, and then develop a resume and online presence that demonstrate the skills and experience. Okay, so here are some common questions that we get. If I come from another type of design background, should I just have one portfolio with all of my work from different types of design? You can have one portfolio, but it typically makes more sense for you to separate UX case studies from other, from other types of your work. So your potential employers are not confused and it's easier to see what you have done in what area. Okay, so if I worked in another design field, do I still need to have 3 UX case studies? Typically, yes. Your design experience will no doubt help you as you position yourself as a designer with years of experience, but you do still need to clearly demonstrate the UX work that you have done and prove to employers that you can do it well for them. If I'm still working full-time at my current job, what is the best way to show part-time UX experience on my LinkedIn or resume? You can easily showcase your UX work in the same experience section in both resume and LinkedIn, right? What is usually much more important is not how many hours per week you're officially working, but what you're able to learn and produce, okay? What results you accomplish and what experience you gain. Someone in a full-time capacity might be doing way less challenging work and accomplishing much less than another person in a part-time capacity, right? It is less about formal hours and more about the significance and amount of output that you're producing. What you want to convey to an employer is that you have done this type of work, you have the skills, and you have the experience and can help them achieve similar great results. Okay? So let me quickly check if there are any questions in Q&A. Isa is asking, I know it varies a lot, but could you share what is the most estimated time to be successful in this transition that you know, and also the shortest time that you know? Okay, yeah, good question. It can vary, right? Quite a bit, depending on the candidate. If you're doing it part-time, and if you're efficient at it, you can probably do it in like 7 to 9 months total, right? Assuming it will take you a little bit of time to learn the foundations, then you can focus. And I mean, but that is pretty ambitious, right? If you're doing it part-time. Then you would need to build more experience and build up your case studies, right? And then learn and grow basically from that, right? Then put all that together for you, in your portfolio, then prepare all the assets, then kick off the job search, practice. So it can take some time, right? If it is full-time, it can be a little bit shorter, obviously, because you're doing it full-time, you're dedicating more effort, but obviously it's much more risky, right? Because if you like quit your current employment, for example, right, it means you can potentially be losing months of salary and months of opportunity cost, right? And there is also no guarantee, even if you go to like a full-time boot camp, for example, we'll cover those options in a bit. But even if you go to a full-time boot camp, right, a lot of them market that, oh yeah, you'll just get hired right away. But unfortunately, it's not always as simple and as easy, right? You may still end up spending about 6 months and be out of work on that, and you need to somehow support yourself, right? So it depends what's a better option for you, right? If you're in a position to quit everything and just focus full time, you can do it a little bit faster, but it's not probably going to be like twice as fast. Maybe like, you can do it in 70% of the time, probably, because you will still need to go through similar phases. So Isa, hopefully that answers your question. Okay, Poonam is asking, how much graphic design UI skills do I need to learn? So it's not the primary focus, of course, but it's really helpful to also learn UI and visual design, right? Because not all roles will require you to do that, but there are plenty of roles, and basically you'll have an advantage if you know those, right? You don't have to be like an expert at it, right? But it's like, at least how we look at it, right? We include visual design and UI as like one of the later phases of the UX process, right? So especially if you go for like a product design role, right? Those often need you to know UI as well, and then visual design as well. So it's especially when you're just transitioning, I would recommend spending some time on that to like pick that up, and don't think that you can just get away doing low fidelity prototypes, and that's it. Even if you're doing research, we typically recommend, if you want to do research, we typically recommend that you pick up some wireframing and prototyping skills, because it will give you an advantage, right? So that you can transition, you can get into the field, and then you can pivot basically and move around. So it will be much easier. All right, so I don't see any other questions. So let's move on to the next section. We have quite a bit of material to cover, but we're almost on the last phase, which has quite a bit, but we're getting there. So step 5, understand and master effective search strategies in the UX hiring process, and then kick off the search. Okay. So now that you're an attractive candidate, you still have a lot of work to do to get a great UX role. So let's cover some mistakes, right, that you want to avoid while you're making this transition. One mistake is viewing job search as simply applying and hopefully interviewing and getting a job, getting a job versus marketing and sales, right? So we'll discuss that in more detail. Next one is launching your search before your assets are solid and can get employers interested. Another one is not learning how to market and sell your services to employers and the science behind that, and basically not understanding and preparing for each of the various phases of that process. Another mistake is using lots of random search methods without an understanding and clear focus on what is actually effective. Basically not spending much time to understand the science behind the search. Not learning and mastering search and just applying to a bunch of jobs instead of having a clear strategy. Okay, and then not studying search strategy options in depth and not understanding which ones are most effective, right? And another mistake is doing all the search activities at once instead of focusing on a particular phase that is most important at the moment. So basically a specific phase of the journey that we're covering, that you're in. And finally, treating networking as just superficial business card exchanges and asking for help a few months after, just when you need it, right? And not helping people yourself. And we'll cover that as well. So there are plenty of mistakes that people make in this phase, and hopefully you guys can avoid all of those. Another big mistake is doing some general prep or no prep, and just going to interviews, hoping for the best. Working with a generalist, one-size-fits-all career coach who does not understand UX interviewing specifics well, or UX domain, kind of like generalist career services people who can't really provide in-depth feedback on UX-specific search process. Using same tactics over and over without identifying the key blockers during your search and focusing on those. Not trying to study and understand companies' hiring processes, not breaking down the UX-specific interviewing process and understanding the key phases and interview types, and finally, omitting presentation and storytelling, studying, and practice. Okay, and the old result is a really long, painful, and frustrating experience, not getting a job and or wasting months or even years to actually get hired. Okay, so let's explore a better way to do this. So you want to first obtain a clear understanding of which UX job search strategies are actually effective, how they work, and master those. And then you want to study the hiring process and gain strong UX interviewing and storytelling skills before kicking off your job search. Okay. So let's start with a few quick examples of how people went about their search. So Carrie realized that networking is key for her to land a UX role. So luckily, she persevered and attended events to meet people on a regular basis. At one of them, she spoke with quite a few people and met one person who happened to know about the UX job opening and introduced her to the team at JP Morgan. Right? And then she prepared for interviewing process extensively and was able to pass the hiring process and land the job. Robbie, so there is a book called 2-Hour Job Search, which is a really great guide by Steve Dalton on how to search for work and how to do informational interviews and network. So Robbie really studied that methodology and put a ton of practice into understanding and preparing for the interviewing process. By using that methodology, Robbie met an extensive amount of people by doing informational interviews, going to events and virtual events, and inviting people for coffees. One of the people referred him to Academy Labs, and due to his extensive practice, Robbie was able to successfully pass the interviewing process. Finally, Chris also realized how crucial how crucial it is to use effective search methods and then understand the interviewing process and prepare really well, right? So he networked and got introduced to a company that had a UX opportunity. His strong interview prep paid off, and he got the role. And finally, Rachel. So Rachel also used a similar approach, right? So you're probably getting the pattern here, right? How a lot of people actually get hired. So she found companies that she was interested in, and then networked extensively to meet people from those companies. After a lot of effort, a connection she made introduced her to the hiring team at one of her target employers. Because she built herself up to be a great candidate and also practiced a ton to ensure she can nail the UX interviewing process, she landed that job. Okay, so let's focus on the first part, actual understanding of which UX job search strategies are effective and how you can how they work and how you can master those. So first of all, we surveyed many successful candidates and found out that about 90% of them found their jobs through referrals or personal connections or recruiters reaching out to them, right? So that's important. So not recruiters looking for jobs for them, but recruiters reaching out to them, right? So this is kind of in line with what you guys saw on the previous slide in those examples. So here are some guidelines for effective search, right? So study job search methods and understand what works best so you can actually allocate your time wisely, because obviously you don't have indefinite time. And if you don't allocate it in a effective way, then you'll just basically can take you like 5 times longer if you get there at all. Again, you want to understand what is effective and what is not, so you can focus on the right stuff that will get you the results and not waste months or even years using wrong approaches. So based on our research, most candidates found jobs through employee referrals, personal connections, or when recruiters found them. And recruiters may be a part of a hiring company or part of an agency staffing firm. So this means you either find roles or you are found, right? So two ways. So we also suggest that you read that 2-Hour Job Search book by Steve Dalton. That is quite helpful. Another great book is called Guerrilla Marketing for Job Hunters, right? So that's another good. So yes, all this reading may take some time, right? But maybe a few days, weeks, right? But it can ultimately save you months or even years in the long run. Network and build relationships to find roles and generate referrals. So use events and informational interviews and make it a habit. Have top-notch online presence to be found by recruiters. So this comes back to creating really solid assets. What we discussed a bit earlier, it is crucial to have a strong LinkedIn profile with the right keywords that will help you show up in those recruiter search results, right? So resume is also key here. Again, ensure it has all the right keywords from the job descriptions. Then you could basically remove any sensitive or private info that you have on it and upload it to various platforms if you wish, like LinkedIn or even like Indeed or Dice or Monster, that recruiters may sometimes use to search for candidates. So basically, some of them, what they do is they download those databases from those websites into their database and then perform search right in their database. So that's why keywords are so crucial. Startups. If you're interested in startups, often cannot afford more expensive platforms and instead may use sites like AngelList or Crunchbase. So do not spend more than 15 to 30% of your time applying on job boards, right? So this is what lots of people do, and employers get hundreds of applications for each of the openings. So unless you really stand out in some way, the chances of hearing back are quite slim, right? However, it can be helpful to use these job boards to get a sense of a company's hiring activity, right? And whether it would make sense for you to actually spend time on building connections there. Okay. Embrace rejection. So job search is marketing and sales, right? And rejection is basically the name of the game here, right? So instead of getting upset, just expect it and learn to look at each rejection as being one step closer to achieving your goal. So it'll be really helpful because it makes you stronger and it helps you learn, progress, and get better. Identify roles and industries where your past experience may help you stand out. It is a good idea to see where you may bring the most value to the table. What this means is trying to identify your low-hanging fruit areas, basically, or industries. For example, if you were a teacher before, you could be more attractive to education technology employers. Or if you have experience in architecture, you may have a little bit more success in something like urban planning or real estate related companies and so on. Okay. So let's touch on some main search channels or methods. Networking is obviously the first one, right? So building relationships with those in the industry through events and informational interviews like coffee chats or virtual meetings, which can help you expand your network, get referrals, and get hired. Make sure you help them as well. And it is definitely a two-way street. Otherwise, you will not get very far, right? So we'll talk more about this crucial channel on the next couple of slides as well. LinkedIn for being found or to find roles. We separate LinkedIn out from other platforms because based on our research, companies and recruiters use it quite extensively. And two, LinkedIn can also be used as a job board, a networking tool, or a way to be found by recruiters, right? So it's kind of unique in that sense. Recruiters is another channel, mostly for being found. There are internal company employers and external ones that are usually a part of a recruiting agency or staffing firm. Most recruiters, this is a very, very important point to understand here, most recruiters do not find jobs for people, they find people for jobs, right? So that is why your assets like LinkedIn, profile, and resume are so crucial, right? So company sites is another one, right? So another channel is applying directly on company sites. This strategy sometimes can also be effective, but only if you first identify the companies that are actually hiring by searching on like Google or Indeed or Glassdoor or LinkedIn, etc. And finally, job boards like Indeed, Glassdoor, Built-in, Dice, Monster, or AngelList, and Crunchbase for startups. Okay. So networking tips and guidelines. Networking is a huge topic in itself and can be like a whole-blown event in itself. So here are just some very high-level tips that we're going to touch on right? Because we don't have time, because we will have to wrap up relatively soon. So we'll give you some high-level tips here. Network effectively, make connections, friends, and build relationships, right? So don't just do this superficial business card exchange. Instead, build relationships, right? And this way you can expand and nurture your network, right? You want to build relationships. If you want to succeed in this area, we also recommend the following books. So write it down if you're interested. Never Eat Alone by Keith Ferrazzi. So that's a great book specifically about networking, especially the first few chapters on the overall networking mindset. Kind of like really like changed my outlook on networking altogether. Before I didn't really like it. I kind of thought about it in a different way, but then it just changes your mindset in terms of just looking at it as giving and relationship building and helping people, right? And they help you, right? So it was really helpful. Give and Take by Adam Grant, and also the old classic by Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People, also really good. Okay. Also, do not wait. Start right away and make networking and connecting with people a habit. Leverage employee referrals. Those can be really powerful. Companies often reward people for bringing in referrals, so those employers are motivated. So that's why doing informational interviews is key, so you can build relationships, and if you click, then those people may refer you, and that increases your chance of getting selected by many times. Some places to network, like where you could network, right? Even like in-person events, for example, right? In person or online. You can use platforms like Meetup, Eventbrite, in New York, Gary's Guide also. We also send out our own newsletter focused on UX events specifically, virtual UX events, right? So you can participate from anywhere. Conferences, there are many online conferences now as well, hackathons, job fairs, on LinkedIn as well. You can find designers in your area, right? And just like do virtual coffee chats or in-person coffee chats. Slack communities, reaching out to the design community and just starting conversation with designers that you admire. And you can do that through like LinkedIn or UX blogs or other channels. Okay. So have a solid 30-second personal elevator pitch ready. This will be quite handy when you are at an event or when you're just randomly meet someone in an elevator or somewhere else. Sounds simple. It's very hard to do, right? To actually impress someone, to like make someone remember you in 30 seconds, right? And like get their attention and like to get them interested to continue the conversation. So you should have a strong 30-second or 1 minute elevator pitch. View networking as mutually beneficial relationship building, as we said earlier. And again, remember that quality is important, right? So instead of just like going to an event and just like trying to like speak with like 30 people very fast for like 1 minute each, it's much more productive to focus on quality and maybe have a more in-depth conversations with like 3 or 5 people. It can be much more useful. Be helpful. Don't just be a taker. Again, read Adam Grant's Give and Take. And basically, even science found that if you give more, you will typically get more. Do not ask about hiring or help right away. You don't want to like sound desperate. Like you want to first build up the relationship, get to know them, and then later on gradually talk about that and mention that briefly. 2-hour job search book can be really helpful in terms of like giving you the exact process and system of how you can do it, right? Not just because most people, to be honest with you, get this wrong, right? And you want to study the principles behind this. Cool. So you want to create a system to stay organized, execute your search efficiently, and achieve results faster. So make an action plan. Basically what you're planning to do, especially important when you're planning to do it. Google a technique called time blocking. And essentially that means putting specific activities on a calendar and treating them like important appointments, right? This is extremely useful for productivity. Keep track of all of your search activities. Set up some time of organizer, set up some kind of organizer tracking system for yourself. It could be a spreadsheet or some organization software like Trello, Asana, or something similar. Otherwise, it may take you many times longer. And if you're not efficient with this process, you may also end up making some costly mistakes, like forgetting where you applied and interviewed and who you need to speak with, thank or follow up, etc. Right, and that could cause you to basically lose on great job opportunities. Okay, now let's continue to the second part and briefly touch on the interviewing piece, right? So basically, you want to study the hiring process and gain strong UX interviewing and storytelling skills before kicking off your search, okay? So here are some typical UX interview process stages. And again, a common mistake is not understanding the hiring process well and not preparing for interviews and design exercises properly. And just thinking that now that you have UX hard skills, and that means you'll just automatically be hired, okay? So typically first screening call is with a recruiter. This is usually mostly about your background and potential fit. If the first interview is passed, then there can be a phone interview with the hiring manager and UX team. Phone interview with a hiring manager or a team member is after that. Face-to-face interview or video interview with several team members and hiring manager, right? So this is usually the longest stage. You will likely do a portfolio presentation or review. Sometimes you may get a design challenge, whiteboarding on site or take home. There may be several interviews with two to four members of the team, which easily can take like 2+ hours, right? And then you may also have a follow-up face-to-face interview. Sometimes this may be another interview during which you could present the take-home design challenge, if there was one assigned, cover loose ends, etc. Right? And finally, if you get an offer, you'll probably have another discussion about the pay, benefits, etc. Okay. So just at a high level, some key common interview types, right? So big mistake is not mastering your presentation and storytelling skills, right? This is absolutely crucial. And even if you have very solid hard UX skills, if you cannot present your work and tell your story, you will usually not get hired, right? So here are some common interview types, like background and fit is another one. So just you and your story. Then behavioral is the next one. It can be something like, tell me about a time when you did X, Y, Z, and like how you solved that problem. Portfolio presentation and walkthrough, right? That's another one, where you essentially tell your story and go over one or several of your case studies. Whiteboarding design challenges, where you're given a prompt, like an app that helps parents select books for their kids or any type of prompt, right? And you need to whiteboard this challenge by essentially taking it through the UX process at a high level and demonstrating your thinking process and ability to think on your feet, right? So these are quite common. Based on our research, these are given like in 50% of the cases or so. And then finally, take-home challenges, right? So similar to whiteboarding challenges, but you have more work, more time to work on it at home and go into a bit more depth and then present your work to the employer or like at another meeting. And these challenges are less common than whiteboarding, but you can still get one sometimes. Okay, so some tips on how to master interviewing, right? So practice in order to master interviewing. If you actually want to get hired, get feedback, improve, and iterate. You might get lucky, but in the vast majority of cases, practice is essentially what mostly determines if you will be able to succeed in the challenging interview process and get the job. So learn more, learn about it, and prepare for all the different types of the interviews. Write out the answers to the most common questions and practice out loud. Have a few good questions for the interviewers. This is also very important, as they often gauge like how engaged you are, how interested you are, and like what kind of questions you ask. Do some mock interviews. It's absolutely crucial. Learn and get great at storytelling. Based on our employer research, this is one of the most important skills to master as a UX designer in general, and is key for the interviewing process, right? So do some research to learn the art of storytelling. Here are a couple of books on this. Anatomy of Storytelling by John Truby is one, and then Wired for Story by Lisa Cron is another one. Okay. So some more guidelines. Let's just cover these briefly and then move on to like wrap things up. So it is useful to learn about psychology of persuasion and influence, right? So if you want to succeed in your interviews, it is very important. So you want to study and boost your persuasion and sales skills, right? So this is extremely important during the interviewing process. So read some articles and books on this topics. A great book on this topic is called Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion by Robert Cialdini, who spent like 30 years researching this topic. Prepare a clear and compelling personal pitch. Right, so this basically is an answer to like the telling me about yourself question. So your quick story. So that is very important. Prepare for portfolio presentations. Learn how to tell your story and present your portfolio. Learn about storytelling and pitching, and ability to present yourself and your projects and tell a story in interviews is absolutely crucial. Practice with lots of design challenges. Prepare, practice, get feedback, and iterate. These are often an important part of the interview process, where you need to essentially take a problem through the whole design process, right? Up to like sketching a wireframe or prototyping. And there is a whole book about this called Solving Product Design Challenges that can really help you, right? So it has examples, it has a framework, just solving product design challenges. That's the name of it. Cool. So, summary of this section. So, first part is just obtain clear understanding which UX job search strategies are effective, how they work, and master those. And then study the hiring process and gain strong UX interviewing and storytelling skills before kicking off a search. Okay, common questions. And feel free to post. If you have any questions, feel free to post those as well. We'll address some questions, then briefly cover some common options available to you, and talk about our own offering briefly, and then we'll wrap things up. Okay. So a few common questions. How often do employers give whiteboarding challenges or take-home design challenges during interviews? Based on our research, usually around 50% of the time, roughly. So you may not always get it, but it's pretty likely that you will get it. Is it effective to try to find a recruiter who will help place me in a UX role? So I know we touched on this before a little bit. So sometimes that could work, but most of the time, recruiters work to help companies fill roles, not help candidates get jobs, right? So that's why I wouldn't rely too much on that strategy. How do you prove or demonstrate your software skills to an employer? So typically, employers will first look for proof of those by looking at your portfolio, resume, and online presence, right? So for example, proof that you worked successfully with real clients and collaborated with the team. Then they will likely ask questions and request you to talk about those experiences during the interview process, and moreover, will evaluate that by asking you to present and give you various assignments that can test those skills. So just a quick recap of the key steps, right? So start with the end in mind, understand where exactly you need to be the highly hireable candidate by potential employers, and how you'll actually get there. Again, starting with the end in mind. Absolutely, very simple, but very crucial, and very few people actually do it. Learn the essentials and foundations without breaking the bank. Practice and grow, become the candidate employers will actually want to hire. Create your irresistible job search assets that show that you're an amazing candidate. Understand and master effective search strategies and the UX hiring process, and then kick off your search. Okay. Okay, so now let's quickly go over some common options available if you're trying to make this career transition, along with some potential and important pitfalls to avoid and watch out for, right? Because there are plenty of those, and all these solutions differ in terms of their quality. So first option is trying to transition on your own, right? And so essentially what some people try to do is just learn independently for free or pretty cheaply, and then just try to find volunteer, internship, or freelance opportunities, or like build experience in some way, right? So obviously this could be the cheapest option, right? It is doable, but you would basically have to navigate and figure everything out on your own. You're pretty much in a vacuum, and this can get quite lonely, maybe even mentally taxing. Again, this approach can take a very long time if it happens at all. You would lack accountability, right? So because you are on your own, there is no structure, support, accountability, and deadlines, right? And this option basically requires tremendous discipline and motivation. So this can work, but usually only for a very small percentage of people. You could take a very long time, potentially like many months or even years. Even though this option is cheap, it's not really cheap in terms of your time. Right? So due to the points mentioned, it will likely delay your progress by months or even years if you even get there at all. Okay. Another option, right? Enroll into a traditional full-time or part-time online career transition bootcamp, right? So let's briefly touch on some challenges or potential pitfalls with full-time bootcamps, right? So just to clarify, this can be a great option, right? For some folks, especially if you're brand new to any type of design and are not coming from other design, research, creative, and similar roles, and you do not have any related higher education, right? Plus, most importantly, you can afford and not work for a few months, right? So that's like a major drawback, basically. However, if you are someone coming from a design or related background or already know the basics or can learn those by taking a foundations course or two independently, this will likely not be the best option, and here's why, right? So you would pay a lot of money and have a huge opportunity cost, right? So if you cannot quit your job and do not have the funds, or it is simply not really an option because you pay a huge amount of money, or even if you do quit your job, then you will likely lose many months of income. The total cost of tuition and lost wages can easily add up to like tuition of like 15 to 20K or something like that, plus another 20 to 40K of opportunity cost. So it can be like 35 to 80 or 70,000 bucks total, right? So it basically can get quite expensive. You may spend quite a bit of the course time on UX foundations. So basically you pay to learn what you might already know. If you already know design foundations or are coming from a related background, a large chunk of the course and your tuition may be spent on learning things you already know, right? And at the same time, you may still gain some of the, so at the same time, you may still not gain some of the key attributes of a highly marketable candidate, right? You would usually gain zero or very little real experience, right? So most likely it will not give you much real experience. So some bootcamps do offer like a short real client project at the end, but it can often be like 10% of the whole course, while when you're actually job searching, it is usually like one of the most important factors, right? So this means your portfolio may not be that strong, right? And it may be hard for you to stand out and compete with other candidates in the job market who have that experience. Okay. So part-time bootcamps, right? So part-time online bootcamps. Again, traditional online part-time bootcamp can also be a great option for some folks, especially for those who are quite new to the design field and can work well independently for months. However, if you already know the basics or are coming from a design-related background or have higher education in this field, it may not be the best choice, and here's why. You'll pay less than the cost of a full-time program, obviously, and will not have to quit your job, right? So that is great. You may spend quite a bit of the course time on UX foundations, right? So again, if you know the basics, you may end up paying to learn what you already know or what you could have learned for free or cheaply, right? If you already know the design foundations or are coming from related backgrounds, again, large chunk of the course basically will be spent on learning things you already learned before, when at the same time you may not have the the attributes of a highly marketable candidate here in this option as well. You would typically gain zero very real experience, very little real experience. So most part-time programs do not give you any real experience. Very few may offer, but again, similar to the full-time boot camps, that is usually a very short client project at the end of the course. So also it may be like 10% of the whole course, roughly, right? So again, when job searching, it can be very challenging because your portfolio won't be that strong, right? And you'll basically have a hard time competing with candidates because this is one of the most important factors. You won't get much practice and development in software skills, right? So you will most likely it will most likely not be effective for developing the critical software skills like team collaboration, client management, stakeholder management, and presentation. Essentially, you'll be spending lots of resources and time only on some of the things that are important for getting hired, right? While allocating very little resources to other crucial things like the softer skills and experience that matter a lot in helping you actually land a UX role. So it just basically does not always make a lot of sense. You would likely spend a long time, right? So this option may drag out progress quite a bit. Some part-time programs can go up to like 8 to 10 months or so, or even longer. Some are also self-paced when there are no real deadlines and structure to ensure that you actually keep progressing. And basically you do it at your own pace. So that means that there's potential for this to drag out for a very long time. You may feel quite lonely and get demotivated in some cases. Typically you work through the entire or vast majority of the course individually. So it can get it can work for some folks. It can get lonely for some others, right? So you will likely have a very limited exposure to industry practitioner mentors. With many programs, you just have one, maybe two mentors that you work with throughout the whole time, right? And basically meet with them like once a week. You may not get much value in terms of expanding your professional network, right? Because most of these programs are based on individual work. And again, you typically work with just one or two main mentors, right? So, and it may still be quite pricey, actually. Cool. So now we're getting to our own offering, right? So obviously, BeginX Accelerator is another option. And for those who know UX basics and come from or can learn those independently, or already come from design, research, creative, tech, or related backgrounds, or have related higher education, this is honestly the best option, right? If you're looking for a part-time transition. Because this accelerator was designed specifically for people like you, right? And to be able to provide you this transition in the most efficient and effective fashion, basically. So I'll explain in more detail and show you why on the next few slides. So again, who the program is best for, right? Those who already know UX basics or are willing to learn those independently, right? Or maybe already taken a course on UX basics. You already know the basics from experience, background, educational courses, or you're one of those folks who are really motivated and can learn that on your own. Those who look to transition into UX role in one of the most efficient and affordable ways, and without quitting your current job, the program works especially well if you already have those foundations down, or already coming from a design-related background. People who are motivated and committed. This is not easy, right? It's a lot of work. So it's almost like a hack, right? Because you'll essentially becoming much more marketable in a shorter amount of time and by spending less amount of money. Okay. So briefly look at our alumni, right? So Ahad, to basically give you an idea of how these folks transition through by using our program. So Ahad learned UX basics by reading books, articles, videos, consuming anything he could about UX, right? And then while still working in architecture, Ahad also did some personal project and then tried searching for jobs afterwards, but it was tough, primarily because not having any real experience, right? And he had challenges with demonstrating softer skills as well. So during the program, he collaborated with a team and helped a medtech startup design their onboarding process. They covered the key phases of the UX process, from research to wireframing to higher fidelity prototyping, and this helped him build up and advance the hard and softer skills like team collaboration, presentation, and gain experience. After that, he started looking for UX roles and landed a job at SiriusXM about a month later only. Okay. Sasha is another great example. So before, she was in marketing and visual design and was able to land a role as a UX designer at Topcon Healthcare Solutions. So she was thinking of becoming a developer, then realized then she realized she really liked UX much better than development. She took a part-time course on basics from New York Code and Design Academy while working in a marketing capacity and doing some visual design. After going through BeginX Accelerator, Sasha finally finished her portfolio, built more real experience, learned job search best practices, started actively looking for UX roles, and she landed a UX job within only 2.5 months of graduation. Okay, and we have lots of case studies like this, lots of alumni, like actually most of the folks we covered, right? So Robbie was a teacher, and he was able to land a UX role at Acadian Labs, right? So when he decided to first transition into UX, he started learning by taking part-time online courses, reading books, and participating in UX events. Later on, he enrolled in BeginX Accelerator and worked on 2 client projects, all while still working at his day job, right? And after a few months of hard work, he got hired by Acadian Labs as a UX designer. Okay, so I'll go over Kirsty's story briefly, and you kind of get the gist, right? So it's quite a few alumni who made this transition successfully. So Kirsty's has an interesting story because before she was actually a paralegal, so completely unrelated area, right? And she made this transition in one of the most efficient ways possible, right? She was working as a paralegal at a law firm. Then she learned about UX and realized it would be a much better fit for her. She was really interested in it. So she plunged into learning UX foundations through just self-paced online courses and reading books. While going through BeginX Accelerator afterwards, she collaborated with a team on an early stage startup client projects. After equipping herself with the skills and experience, Kirsty started networking with her company and was able to actually gradually transition into a product design role right within that company. Okay, and so I'm not going to go into all the details for the other folks, but you can also see Rachel, right? So Rachel was in fashion design, and she got hired as a UX designer at American Specialty Health. Eduardo, right? So he was an industrial designer and landed a product designer role afterwards. Carrie was in sales and business development and got a job in UX at JP Morgan right away as a UX researcher, actually. Okay, so let's briefly touch on the key benefits and we'll wrap things up. So essentially, when you're accepted in the program, you gain most of those key attributes of a highly hireable candidate that we covered, besides the basics, right? Because you can learn those on your own in advance. We can actually guide you, right? We now have a special guide that we designed by aggregating and consolidating lots of online courses that we can share with you, right? Or maybe you already know the basics, right? So you will essentially plug into an ecosystem of accelerated career transition with guidance, clarity, and certainty of making this career switch effectively and without wasting months or even years trying to figure things out on your own, right? So the accelerator combines the best elements of training, apprenticeship, mentorship, career prep, networking into one system, okay? So you'll build real experience that is crucial to landing a job with most employers. You'll build and advance hard UX skills. You'll also practice and build the critical softer UX skills you can pick up in a textbook or on your own, such as leadership and team collaboration, presentation, and client management. We first help you become a candidate employers want by working on all the activities we covered in this training, and then we help you brand and position yourself by creating search assets according to the best practices, right? And you will not just learn theory about those, you will actually work on those in a hands-on format and iterate based on multiple rounds of personalized feedback from multiple UX practitioners, right? So not just one, but actually multiple viewpoints. This will help you nail the UX portfolio, resume, LinkedIn, and other online presence and attract employers. You will master UX interviewing, storytelling, and effective search methods with hands-on practice and multiple rounds of personalized mentor feedback from industry practitioners. You will expand your network by building relationships with their permanent and guest mentors who are all UX practitioners. By networking also with your team, your cohort, and guest speakers that we invite to the sessions, basically you'll become a part of our mentor and alumni community, right? Our goal is to get you hired into UX role, right? So we support and mentor you even after you finish the program. Very important that you actually do not have to quit your job until you're hired in the UX role, right? Which means you do not need to lose your source of income, assume a ton of risk, and potentially get into lots of debt, right? So essentially, you save a ton of money by paying a fraction of a full-time bootcamp cost, and you may save like 20 to 60K while making the career transition, for 4 or 5K when a full-time bootcamp could cost you 15 or 20, right? And it's 20 or 50 in lost wages. Okay, so in fact, our grads have done so well that we also offer a money-back guarantee. So basically, it's very simple how that works. You get to 3 case studies, you start your search and land a UX job within 6 months of that, or you get your tuition back plus an extra $200 as well. Okay, so now, if you wanted to make this career transition before by enrolling in a full-time bootcamp, it will cost you at least like 15 to 17K plus several months of lost income to attend that bootcamp and several more months for the job search, right? Since you would have to quit your job. So we already discussed that, which could easily cost you like anywhere from like 30 to 70K, right? If you enroll in typical online bootcamp, it usually costs at least like 6 and up to 15K, while most frequently, if those programs run for quite a long time, usually do not help you build real experience or software skills like team collaboration, client management, and presentation, and only have a very limited exposure to actual industry practitioner mentors, if at all. With BeginX Career Accelerator, you only pay a fraction of the full-time bootcamp cost and still way less than even the part-time online bootcamps, right? If it sounds like you may be a good candidate, go ahead and request a free career transition consultation, or you could also just apply on our website. It's beginx.com. And here's what this consultation can actually help you with, right? So you would get advice navigating your UX career transition from experts who helped 100+ people get hired. You'll receive personalized advice from the executive program director who has a UX and product background and is not just a sales rep, right? So you can ask questions about switching to a UX career and how the program can help, and understand if you may be a good fit for the program, right? So the consultation is also free and there is no any kind of commitment, okay? And we usually do roughly about 16 to 20 such consultations per month. And our program cohorts are actually quite small, right, to ensure personalized attention. And each one usually only has about 12 people, and that's why they fill up pretty quickly. So if you feel like you could be a good fit and are interested in the next cohort, or in the following cohort, next cohort is actually full already, please act very soon. Okay. Finally, if you watched this entire webinar, this entire training, and made it all the way to the end, it seems like you may be someone who is quite dedicated. So to reward that, you will actually be able to get a $200 tuition credit if accepted into the program. Okay. So to claim that credit, you can just request a free career transition consultation now. Okay. Awesome, guys. So thanks, everyone. It was great to everyone. So we'll take a few more questions. If anyone has any additional questions, feel free to just post those in Q&A. Rowan, yes, you do have access to mentors after graduation. You get additional individual career support and you get group career support. So Rowan is asking, would it be okay to put an open to volunteer or pro bono work on my website? So that can be tricky, right? So you could potentially do that, right? But don't expect for people or employers or companies to just like run into your website magically, right? So usually it's not how it happens, right? So usually this is just a place where you showcase your work, right? So you showcase your portfolio. So you would basically need to prospect and find them and do that. And also in the program, because you are in the program, right? So we have partner client projects as well, right? So you guys can participate in those. So you don't even have to do any of that work, right? And we ensure that the project is sizable, comprehensive, it's a good company, they want to collaborate with you, and it's good for your portfolio, etc. Right? So what I would be careful with is sometimes people like are On LinkedIn, they're like they're putting like searching for opportunities. Right? You never, if you need to like, so study sales a little bit, pick up that book called Influence by Cialdini. You never want to look desperate, right? So you always want to look like, you're someone that employers really want. All right, thanks everyone. It was great to have you guys here. Thanks again for joining. It was a pleasure. Hope you found this very useful.